Only Angels Have Wings from 1939 tells the exciting story of a small air freight company in a remote South American port, the fictitious foggy town of Barranca, where pilots routinely risk their lives delivering mail, bananas, and other supplies. As we arrive at this place, we see some great atmosphere. It's steamy, bustling, and full of activity. People carrying bananas and stuff like that. We see cabaret singer Bonnie Lee, played by actress Jean Arthur, who has just arrived off a boat and she's walking around to see all of the sights, and she meets some of the local pilots who work there who seem very interested in her as a visitor. Now, the company here that does all of this freight is owned by a character named Dutchie, played by Sig Ruman. Now, he owns this Barranca Airways, as well as the local hotel that's right there. Now, this airline is managed by a character named Jeff Carter, played by Cary Grant. And he's just this cool, no-nonsense pilot. Well, the story takes place in the early days of aviation. To make things worse, we're at a location where they have to deal with bad weather and dangerous mountainous environments. So several pilots have already lost their lives, including the character Joe, who early in the film, he crashes because of the fog. So Jeff and the others, they just attempt to deal with it by remaining stoic and unfazed when this kind of thing happens. As this is just a regular part of their reality. Well, Bonnie sees this and maybe is a little put off by how just cold they are to the situation, but at the same time, she is drawn to the character of Jeff and decides to stay. Even though Jeff himself seems to be soured to relationships due to a bad past experience with one particular woman. Now, soon the character of Bat McPherson arrives. He's played by Richard Barthelmess. Now, he is a new pilot there, and we learn that this character was responsible for the death of another pilot in the past. So, as you can expect, he gets a pretty cold reception from the other pilots. Now, to further complicate things, he's there with his wife, Judy, who we find out was once romantically involved with Jeff. Judy is played here by the legendary Rita Hayworth. Now, with these pilots facing regular dangerous, treacherous flights with poor weather conditions and unreliable planes, the fate of all of these guys is uncertain. And is there room here for relationships with the tough, no-nonsense pilot Jeff and Bonnie? Or is there still a fire in his heart for Judy? Well, there's a lot going on in this movie. That's a quick summary. But let me go into some more closing thoughts and analysis on this film. Only Angels Have Wings was released in 1939 by Columbia Pictures, and it was directed by Howard Hawks, based on a story written by Hawks. It was nominated for 2 Academy Awards for Best Black and White Cinematography, Joseph Walker, and Best Special Effects, Roy Davidson and Edwin C. Hahn. Working title of this film was Plane Number 4. And yeah, I'm glad they didn't use that because, let's be honest, that's kind of goofy sounding. So my thoughts on Only Angels Have Wings was, this is a wild ride, and there was so much that I just loved about this film. Cary Grant here was just cool and unshakable as the hero who commands this group of pilots who, again, they just stoically face death, almost detached from the reality of it. When the character Joe dies early in the film, it's almost a little jarring and surreal how these guys just dismiss it. There's not really any mourning, and in fact, Cary Grant's character just lays out the dead man's possessions on the bar and tells the guys to take what they want. Now, according to director Howard Hawks, this reaction to death, it was a necessary part of their professional attitude. Quoting Hawks here, "It's just a calm acceptance of fact. In Only Angels Have Wings, after Joe dies, Cary Grant says he just wasn't good enough. Well, that's the only thing that keeps people going. They have to say, Joe wasn't good enough, and I'm better than Joe, so I go ahead and do it. And they find out that they're not any better than Joe, but then it's too late, you see? Unquote. Now, watching this, I have seen a lot of movies with Cary Grant where he's a little more carefree, more of a dandy, more of a ladies' man, easygoing. So you watch him in a film like this, you might be taken back a little by how it's a little bit darker of a character for Cary Grant than you're used to seeing. He's just a lot harder and more serious through the film. But it's interesting to note that this was the second of 5 films that Grant would make with Hawks. And while in this film he's much more somber, the other roles he would act in would be considerably more lighthearted and comedic. Bringing Up Baby in 1938, His Girl Friday from 1940, I Was a Male War Bride from 49, and Monkey Business from 1952. So going into this one, just be aware that this is maybe a shade darker Cary Grant than you might be used to. Now, as I watch and review these old films, I've been learning more about Howard Hawks, and I've grown to understand what some would consider Hawksian elements in the movies. It's namely things that you see in a lot of his films, like the theme of a tight-knit group of guys working together under a strong leader. It's definitely the case in this film, but you also see it with the cowboys of his film Red River, or even with the soldiers in the film Sergeant York. These are men working closely together under a strong leader during intense, dramatic times. Another thing to note would be women in Hawks films are frequently depicted as tough, witty, and confident. I will say, though, that Jean Arthur's character at times almost doesn't seem to be able to find her place here, with all of these callous pilots who are always facing the reality of death. Cary Grant's character does seem to warm to her eventually, but I couldn't help but think that his management of this freight company and his singular focus into it was kind of the main drive of his character in the film. And he doesn't really let himself get distracted initially. But as the film progresses, you start to see some change in his character. And while it was nice to see Rita Hayworth again, she was only 21 here in this film. She really, to be honest, doesn't play a very major role here at all. Although, if you look at some of the publicity stills and movie posters, you might be led to think otherwise, but it's not really the case. A little more on Howard Hawks. He had a background in aviation that is very evident in his filmmaking. He had learned to fly and had enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Service in 1917. Now, he didn't see combat personally, but served stateside as a flying instructor. Aerial footage was a big part of this film, and also a key part of other films he worked on, such as The Dawn Patrol in 1930, and the World War II bomber drama Air Force in 1943. Honestly, some of the flight visuals of this film are just breathtaking. I know this will probably get me a copyright claim, and I'm going to be writing an email about it, but I have to include some of this for you guys to see. This is, to me, just fantastic, how Hawks captures this particular scene of a small plane just making its way around this mountain. Please, Columbia Pictures, I'm just showing people what makes this film so good, this mastery that Howard Hawks had. And just watch this scene here. To me, it's wild thinking that this was captured by another plane that was flying along with it. This is back in 1939, remember? And of course, another thing I loved was these steamy tropical locations of crowds of merchants with stacks of bananas and so on. The atmosphere is just thick with fog one minute, then drenched with rain the next, and then clear, and then cold and dreary. It's like the weather just changes constantly through the film. The local bar and trading post run by Dutchie, to me, had the same appeal as another fictitious place, which would be Rick's place from Casablanca. I watch it in a film like this. I know it's make-believe, but it still looks so inviting. Like it's an actual place you could go to and you could step inside and you could enjoy the music and get a meal and a drink and everything. And a couple other noteworthy performances I did want to point out. Thomas Mitchell as Kid Dab was to me a very sympathetic picture of an aging pilot who, because of his failing vision, he needs to be grounded, and he's someone who's been in the air for so long, he doesn't take kindly to this order. And also, Richard Barthelmess was noteworthy as the character Bat McPherson. He is not liked at all upon arrival, but he's not really like your typical villain character, and instead, he's a character that earns his place and the respect of the other men through the film. Curious bit of trivia is that Barthelmess had, in real life, these deep facial scars from an infection due to plastic surgery. Man, plastic surgery in the 1930s? Ugh, I don't want to think about that. Anyhow, he would basically wear makeup to cover this for his films, but Howard Hawks convinced him to leave them on display as being important to his character. And I guess it's just me. I kind of noticed a little bit of marks under his eyes. Maybe it's a little more subtle. But yeah, watch the film, and you can kind of see these marks will just appear from time to time. All right, I've been rambling on a lot about this film because I think it's fantastic. But before I wrap up, would you care to take a ridiculous, nostalgia-fueled side trip with me? So going back to my childhood here, roughly 1982-83 time frame, I used to watch a show called Tales of the Gold Monkey every Wednesday night on ABC. I swear sometimes this feels like a Mandela effect thing because virtually no one I know around my age demographic has any memory of ever seeing this show. So I'm positive I saw it. But, let me know in the comments if you remember this show or if you have any idea what I'm talking about. Anyhow, I remember catching this show. I was probably about 9 years old at the time, and I thoroughly loved it. The 80s were a golden era of TV shows aimed at kids. Let's be honest. Knight Rider, A-Team, Street Hawk, Manimal, and so on. Okay, Rob, why do you bring this up? Okay, I've been watching Tales of the Gold Monkey on YouTube again recently. Really enjoying it. So like I do as I watch a movie or I watch a show, I start researching it. And it was curious to me to discover that creator Don Belisario said that the show Tales of the Gold Monkey wasn't based on Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I had originally thought, but instead it was based on this film, the 1939 Howard Hawks film, Only Angels Have Wings. Really? Okay, having watched both at the same time, maybe I can see some of the parallels. Both are set in a fictional South Pacific, South American port town. Both are based around a bar with an inn as the central hub. Both involve pilots and dangerous situations, and there's a little romance involved too. I suppose, in thinking about it, the only major difference would be that Tales of the Gold Monkey was a pulpy adventure TV series that also featured samurai, Nazis, pirates, killer monkeys, and a one-eyed dog. But otherwise, they're both pretty... Okay, no. They actually have very little in common. I don't know what I was thinking. Let me close this one out. Now that I've completely ruined an otherwise decent review with that silly detour. My 3 fans suddenly dwindle down to 2 fans. Only Angels Have Wings from 1939 was an exciting mix of loyalty, friendship, danger, and a little bit of romance too, set in a South American locale, featuring daring pilots who are ready to risk their lives to make these deliveries. Cary Grant is a little more serious than you might be used to, and yet still has that charm as the lead of the film. He's so watchable in this movie. And Jean Arthur brings warmth and wit and kind of takes some of the heavier edge off of the tension of the story, I thought. The steamy, foggy, rainy environment of the film and those high-flying sequences, they're so great in this movie. Only Angels Have Wings. It's about heroism and sacrifice of these brave men facing these incredible risks. It's a timeless classic, and it's definitely one worth checking out. Tales of the Gold Monkey, on the other hand, I'll leave that one up to you.